Let's stay with the Judicial Service Commission. They've been interviewing candidates, 5 candidates, for 2 positions of judges on the Constitutional Court. Now, you may remember that the Judicial Service Commission has changed. Certain people are no longer there. Chris Oxtoby is a senior researcher at the Democratic Governance and Rights Unit at the Department of Public Law at the University of Cape Town. He's been in the room watching the interviews all day. Chris, good afternoon to you, and I really appreciate the time. So we remember the last time you and I spoke, in fact, on the pulse, was during the interviews for the position of Chief Justice. The Judicial Service Commission took a lot of criticism, particularly because of the behaviour of 3 people: the EFF leader Julius Malema, the advocate Griffiths Madonsela, and the advocate Dali Mpofu. Both Mpofu and Madonsela are no longer on the Judicial Service Commission. It also has a new chair in Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. Has the Commission behaved differently as a result, do you think?
It certainly has been a different atmosphere in the room. I think also there's an important additional dynamic which plays into that, and that is that the Commission took a whole day out yesterday to meet and discuss their mandate. And certainly in the early parts of today, that really seemed to make a notable difference, where we saw questions being asked and expressly linked to criteria that the Commission were applying, which is what many of us who've been watching the JSC over the years have been crying out for so long. So I think that's really helped. We've seen a much more focused set of interviews so far, I think. We have seen a more harmonious atmosphere in the room. I think Chief Justice Zondo does bring a particular sort of gravitas and energy to the interviews. It's also improved the atmosphere. I think the exchange that we've just been seeing now about how to deal with these adverse comments in relation to Judge Unterhalter does point out to the fact that there is still work to do on improving and fine-tuning the process, though.
In a way, it's a slightly... I mean, there's so much that has changed. In my experience of these interviews, the person who's the chair really matters. It's a really important position. In the past, we had Judge Kolopetse, who's from the Supreme Court of Appeal, who chaired the last set of hearings. Before that, Judge Zondo chaired the hearings, but as acting Chief Justice. And before that, it was Judge Mogoeng as Chief Justice at the time. Do you see a sort of different character to these hearings, depending on who the chair is?
Absolutely. No, I think it makes a fundamental difference, and I think the chair really has the ability to set the tone and to serve an almost inspirational role in terms of the kind of questions that they ask. I mean, I remember some years ago when the then Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke chaired a couple of sessions, he began asking questions of candidates about their background and about the inarticulate premise, which had not featured in JSC interviews to that time. And it really rubbed off on commissioners who would then ask that question for some time to come after he'd left and was no longer chairing the sessions. So I think it does make a significant difference, and I think commissioners do often pick up their cue from the tone that the chairperson sets. And I think that Justice Zondo has shown that already in this sitting so far, that he's set a particular tone for how the interviews are being conducted.
I'm a cynical person, I think you know that about me, but there may be another reason why this is the case, which is, if I've understood my Constitution correctly, and you'll know our Constitution better than I do, Chris, but all 5 of the candidates will actually go through. Could the fact that these have been relatively easy interviews be because there's really no heat in it?
I mean, you're absolutely right that the Constitution means that in order to fill the 2 vacancies that are advertised for the court, all 5 of these candidates do have to be sent to the President for him to make the selection. So that may well be a factor. I think we've still seen some tough questions being asked as the day's gone on. I would like to preserve a note of optimism and hope that it is also a product of the JSC reflecting on their work and a sign of a positive change for the future. But I suppose the proof of that particular pudding is going to be in the eating, and we'll have to see how the rest of this week and indeed subsequent sittings of the JSC go.
There's a big issue about diversity in our courts and diversity in our judges, and particularly in the Constitutional Court at the moment. There is a suggestion from some quarters that one of the problems with the court is that there are no white people on the Constitutional Court. Now, I feel a bit strange talking about this because I am myself a white man, as obviously so are you. But for a very long time, there were more white men on the court than anyone else. And for a very long time, if I remember correctly, there were only 2 black women on the Constitutional Court. There were not enough women and not enough black women on the Constitutional Court for a very long time. So when we talk about diversity now, does it really matter that there aren't any white people on the Constitutional Court at this moment? I mean, there's a really, quite, I suppose, a philosophical argument to make around whether diversity in every instance or diversity over the course of time on the Constitutional Court.
I mean, it's an incredibly interesting question, and it's particularly interesting, again, for those who have watched the JSC over a long period of time. The idea that we would be sitting here having a debate about whether Section 174(2) of the Constitution, which deals with demographic representation, would actually be requiring us to appoint a white man to the Constitutional Court. That's a concept that just would have been absolutely unheard of for many, many years. I personally think that you're quite right to point to the historic background of the fact that the reason we have these provisions talking about the need to transform the judiciary comes about because for so long in our history the judiciary was dominated by white men. So it does seem quite perverse to be saying that we now, in the interests of diversity, have to appoint more of them. My personal view is that I would not like to see any judge appointed to the court purely because they're a white man to balance the demographics out. I think one would have to first look at questions of what do they bring in terms of their judgments, in terms of their commitment and understanding of the Constitution. I think this is a point that Justice Rogers was trying to put across in his interview, although with great respect to him, I think he might have wanted to have that particular exchange over again. So I don't think that diversity, that the Constitution requires diversity that takes the form of appointing a white man simply because there are no white men there at the moment. I think it's broad. I think the Constitution requires us to talk about, to look at representation more broadly than that. And it's a question that the JSC and the President are going to have to wrestle with in the coming weeks.